We all lie. All of us. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not habitually, surely not pathologically, but we do. We do. And as we get to this part of Matthew chapter 5, Jesus talking to those folk who were interested in following him, he was also, I think, looking at this, looking at the church, looking at the community of faith and the relationships that make the church what the church ought to be. Not just an organization, not just an ecclesiastical gathering, but a body, a family, a connected group of believers. He talked about those things that can so erode our relationships that it destroys the integrity of the fellowship. So as I was getting ready to preach this, I thought about some church experiences that I've had and some church settings that I have been in. And I don't know if y'all have ever been in this type of situation, but back early in my ministry, I was basically an habitual supplier. I was called on as a 15, 16, 17-year-old while I was still in high school to be the supply preacher. When the preacher was sick or on vacation, they knew Daddy. And so they had enough confidence that I wouldn't mess it up terribly bad, and they would invite me to come and preach. And so I'd put on my one suit that I had and gather up one of my 5 or 6 sermons that I was comfortable with, and I would take off and be the supply preacher on that given Sunday. And there were those churches that when I got there, I'd park out in the parking lot, and I would walk in, and it was as if you had walked into a meat locker. There was such a coldness in the room that you could feel it. There was no welcoming, there was no warmth, there was no, we're glad that you're here, can't wait to worship with you, thank you for coming. It was that there was the designated escort, the person who was to meet me out in the parking lot and guide me to my spot. They would point me to my spot, say, you can just sit here until it's your turn to preach. They'd point at me when it was my turn to preach, sit there like a tree full of owls for that 30 or 40 minutes that I was preaching, and I was giving them some of my best 17-year-old stuff. I mean, I was laying it out. And then the invitation would come, and, I'm expecting at that point, I'm naive, and I'm expecting the Spirit to break loose and people to get saved and people to get right with the Lord, and they'd all just stand there and stare at me with an evil stare. And then the designated prayer, whoever that was, would pray the benediction. And then I'm telling you, it was like somebody had flushed a covey of quails. You did not want to get between them and the back door. And you certainly didn't want to be in the parking lot because, it was whoosh. And they were gone. All of a sudden, they were out of there. And I was left with my escort, the same one who guided me in, guided me out. And they would give you this invitation like, now, if you'd like to, we'll take you to lunch. And I'm thinking, I don't want to eat lunch with any of you people. I'm afraid I might get poisoned in the process, and so I'd go on home and have lunch. But it's hard to believe that a place that calls itself the church could be so sick that the relationships have disintegrated to that point. But it happened, and sometimes I'd ask questions, and sometimes I wouldn't. I'd just remember, don't ever go back there again. And then you'd walk into a church where there was a wonderful spirit, and it was just such a difference in the body of Christ. Jesus was looking at that group of disciples who were following him, knowing well that there are those things that can creep into the body of Christ, that can creep into the fellowship, that can totally disintegrate what the Lord wants for us. And if the church becomes unhealthy because these things creep in, there's no way in the world we're going to accomplish God's purposes for us. So this is just one of those. And it's one, again, and I think I can say honestly and forthrightly to all of you, I think we all struggle with this. Again, sometimes very unconsciously, but we struggle with maintaining that truthfulness that allows us to maintain our integrity. So we come to the 5th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, and I want to begin reading with verse 33, and we'll read down through verse 37, and then we're just going to explore this for a few minutes. And we're going to come to a point where I'm going to allow, frighteningly, a little audience participation. And so be ready. I'll make clear that it's not a rhetorical question so that you just sit there and stare at me. But I want you to be ready. Think about some of your best lying attempts over the years. Just have those in the back of your mind. Some of your best lying attempts over the course of your life. And just kind of hold that at bay, because that may help you answer the question when I get there in just a few minutes. Again, you have heard that the ancients were told. This is that formula again. In some of your translations, you've heard it said of old, it says. Again, you've heard that the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. Back in the day, that's what they said. Then he turns it around. But I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. But then the conclusion, here it is, but let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond these is of evil. We ask, are you telling the truth? When we were a certain age, and I don't know where we learned it, it just became the go-to response. Are you telling the truth? Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. Oh, well then obviously you're telling the truth. Somehow adding that little qualifier, that cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye, that verified that you were indeed willing to and consistently telling the truth. I'm still not sure where that came. I looked it up just like you could. You could Google it and see where did that statement come from, and nobody really knows. But they did, suggest that it could be so serious that you would be willing, if you were lying, you would be willing to take the consequence of having somebody stick a stick through your eye, because that was how they made sure that somebody was dead. Now, I've never been around where they did that. That seems a little severe to me. Is he still moving? No, I think he's still breathing. Well, let's check and see. Just stick him through the eye. Vampires, I think they did something with, but I don't know where that came from, but it sounds very serious. I can tell you, I've had a professional stick a needle in my eye, and I'm telling you, you don't want that. That is not a pleasant experience where the doctor comes at you and says, to me, one of the stupidest things an eye doctor could ever say, he's coming at your eyeball with a needle and he says, don't flinch. Don't flinch. No, I'm going to jerk just as you get that needle in my eye and see all of my vitreous humor just spill out onto my cheek there and go, oh, what happened, doc? Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. There was an Old Testament practice that Jesus references, and when he ties it to what was said of old, what the ancients were told, he's tying it to those rules and regulations that guided the taking of oaths to verify whether something was truthful or not. So I've organized this into 3 questions, and again, stay tuned because you're going to get to be involved here in just a minute. But I began with this question. You might think it a foolish one, but I don't at all. What is the value in a lie? Why lie in the first place? Why would we purposefully choose to ignore the truth and to share something that is not truthful? Jesus tied it to that Old Testament practice of making or taking oaths. When you read the Old Testament, you find that there was a long period of time there where oath-taking was actually encouraged. You'll find it in Scripture as you read that. There are numerous references there that you could find. But by the time Jesus is sharing this Sermon on the Mount, what had been a prescribed practice had deteriorated significantly. What had been useful at one time had become not only not useful, but had become detrimental to the body, to the fellowship, to the unity of those who were following after Christ. Someone said that swearing in God's name in the Old Testament was not only presumed, but encouraged. But the second part of that was you were discouraged when you made a vow, when you swore to do something, you were discouraged from not following through on your vows. You were demanded that if you took the vow, if you made the oath, that then you followed through on it and keep your word. Over time, the exploration was, the grammatical exploration was, how can we come up with a vow? How can we come up with an oath that sounds real, that sounds impressive, that's so full of verbiage, that it sounds as if you're really telling the truth, but how can we construct it so that we leave ourselves an out, a loophole? How could we come up with a way to sound like we mean what we're saying when in fact we really don't? The old folks said, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. He said, now that we're here, now that we are together, and we're talking about who we are as the body, who you are as followers of mine, he said, my direction to you, my instruction to you is make no oath at all of any kind. No matter what the words are, no matter what you swear by, make no oath at all. Now the question is there, what is that oath that he's talking about? Well, it's a solemn statement, not necessarily a promise or a vow, that would be affirmed to be true before God. A solemn statement affirmed to be true before God. I promise. I swear. Now, I want to interject at this point. There are those religious sects, there are those religious groups who have taken these verses of Scripture and have decided this means that a Christian can never take an oath. And so these are those folks that when they go to court and they hand the Bible out there and say, put your hand on the Bible and raise your hand, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, they refuse. Because they say that in their religion they are forbidden from the taking of oaths. As a Baptist who is not at all offended by that, I have placed my hand there on more than one occasion when I was testifying, called to give evidence in a particular case. I'll raise my hand all day long in court, and I am comfortable with that. I don't think this is a prohibition for us as believers from taking an oath of truth-telling when we are in court. The application, I think, is in a different place. It is that you and I are prohibited, strongly discouraged, from so twisting our words and twisting the truth that we turn it into a lie. Now, back to my original question of this point. What is the value in a lie? Now, I told you to think about your best episode of lying, and you've got that idling in the back of your mind. And so I want to ask you, what is the value in a lie? What do you and what do we get out of telling a lie? Let me prime the pump. Let me suggest 3 or 4 things, and then I want to give you an opportunity to respond if you so choose. It's not self-incriminating. It's not suggesting that this is why you lie. It's just what you've observed in other people why they lie. Let's go with that tonight. That's safer, okay? What is the value in a lie? Number 1, you can use a lie to manipulate, to get what you want out of a person or out of a situation. You can so twist the details to make this thing work for you, to manipulate somebody or a set of circumstances. 2, you can lie to create false impressions. I can't tell you the number of times in the last 10 years that I've been aware of a situation where a preacher type, I'm not talking about intellects out there in the secular world who were professors or what, I'm talking about preacher types who have been found out to have falsified their resumes, saying that they graduated from such and such university, they have this degree that they studied in this place or that place, and then somebody did a little checking, which, by the way, you can do these days. Somebody did a little checking and found out that not only did they not have a degree from that place, they never even attended there. And so when they were called on it, it was basically they said, oops, that's good, oops. But it creates that impression that they are something more than they are. Let's go from the world of preaching academia to the world of fishing and golf for just a moment. I've played golf over the years with a number of folks, some sitting in this room, but none sitting in this room are guilty of what I'm about to describe. But it was always a blessing to play golf with a group of Christian men who couldn't count. All teeing off from the same spot and all moving toward the hole. And the way golf works is every time you swing at a ball trying to hit it, that's the key. You get a couple of warm-up shots, but every time you swing at a ball trying to hit it, you have to count that. If it goes 6 inches or if it goes 60 yards, you've got to count that. And so you're making your way down the fairway and you're kind of hitting in order. It's not like everybody's hitting all at one time and there's pandemonium on the golf course. I mean, you kind of, it's your you go ahead, you're out, you play, you're out, you play, okay, it's my turn. And so we're all kind of moving together. And if you can master third grade math, you can kind of keep up where everybody is. And so occasionally, and I'm going to say occasionally, I would have a decent hole. My goal would be to bogey a hole. I mean, to me, that's outstanding when you could do that. And so I get up there, and I have worked hard. I've sweated, and I have earned a 5 on a par 4. And one of our brethren, some still with us, some dead and gone, one of our brethren who had hacked his way up the fairway and had at least taken 8 swings by that time, finally got the ball into the hole, stood up and proudly declared, I got a par on that one. I made a 4. How? How did you do that? What new math takes 8 strokes of golf and turns it into a par? But you look at the scorecard at the end of the day and he says, I got a par. And that was offensive. I'm a golfer. Now, I'm not much of a fisherman. I'm going to confess that. Brother Tim is our staff fisherman. But here's what I'm observing. Fishermen will lie too. They'll lie about the number of fish that they caught, and they will lie about how big the fish were. I have watched in progressive conversations around this church, I have watched a single fish grow at least 3 pounds in about 30 minutes. To go from a 2.5-pounder to a 5-pounder, just in the retelling of the stories. And usually it was because somebody else had caught one bigger than that last story I told, and that can't be. You can't catch one bigger than me today, and so I'm going to improve my lie. By the way, that's a golfing term, improving your lie. And basically what that means is if you're, behind something or you have an unfair disadvantage because of a clump of mud, you can improve your lie. We've taken that to mean that you really earned a 6, but you've taken a 4. That's improving your lie. That's what that has come to mean. Making yourself seem to be something that you're not, creating a false impression. 3, the value in a lie. To escape responsibility. Who broke that? Not me. Who ate that last? Not me. Who? Not me. Knowing that if I say, yeah, it was me, there are going to be consequences. And of course, I always got that little lecture from the parent type, and they would say something like, it would have been a whole lot better if you'd told the truth in the first place. And see, I still question that one to this day. If I had stepped up right off the bat when they'd asked, okay, who broke the lamp while we were gone? If I had said, truthfully, it was me, would they have said, well, Clint, that is so impressive. You stepped right up and you told the truth, and today you're going to get a pass. I don't think so. I know my daddy too well. I think it would have been, really? You did that? Get to the bathroom. Bend over that commode. We'll take care of this. And I think it would have been just as bad. So that part I question, but it was sometimes convenient to try to escape responsibility. What's the value in a lie? To cause hurt. Because when you have a vendetta, when you have a grievance against someone, it is really easy to plant seeds of doubt or stories or explanations that create a lack of trust to hurt that individual. And you can evade responsibility. Oh, that's not what I meant. Oh, that's not what I intended for you to understand. But with that lie, we have caused hurt. Okay, let's take just a minute here. You've been thinking and you're chomping at the bits because, Clint, I got one. So in your experience, beyond those things that I have mentioned there, and remember, I'm going to tell you up front, we're streaming this live. People all over the world are listening to this sermon. They're not seeing you. They're only going to see me. They will not be able to hear you. And so I'm not going to call you by name and say, oh, Sarah, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm not going to do that to you. But I will repeat it if I think it's repeatable. If it doesn't make a lick of sense, I'm going to ignore you and move on to the next one, okay? So just know you're safe with me. Okay, what is the value of a lie? Why do we lie? Just raise your hand. All right, Randy. To save somebody from hurt. Oh, that sounds noble. Okay. All right. Somebody else. Why do we lie? John. Okay, here's a whole genre here that we don't have time to explore tonight, but he said, those brethren who are asked by their wives, does this dress make my hips look wider? That's that same genre where they come back from the beauty shop and they've spent $85 and they ask, does my hair look good? That's the horns of a dilemma. The horns of a dilemma. Okay. That's kind of escaping responsibility there. Somebody else. Why do we lie? This is your chance. Dave.
Save myself from hurt.
Save yourself some hurt. Yes. To avoid responsibility, to avoid repercussions. Excellent. Good. Somebody else. Why do we lie? Okay. I see your hand. Have you got one? Because you don't want to get in trouble. That's a good one. And you've never done that, have you? Good answer. Good answer. Because you don't want to get in trouble, and you feel like that if I come clean, there are going to be consequences. Somebody else. Anybody else? We're not going to stay here long. I see that hand back there. Laura, go ahead. The devil made me do it. You were too young to know who Flip Wilson was. Yeah, the devil made me do it. I couldn't help myself. I don't know what came over me. All right, one more. We got one more? Why do we lie? All right, Jeremy?
You've done it so much, it's habitual.
Say it again.
You've lied so much, it's become a habit.
Ooh, my goodness. You've lied so much that it has become an ingrained habit. You can't recognize the truth any longer. Okay. But for us at that point, the lie becomes a tool, and it has value to us if it accomplishes what we want it to accomplish in our life. Okay, now that leads into my second question, and the second part of the text as the Lord unfolds it. When we habitually lie, when we practice deception, I'm not talking about the occasional misstatement, the occasional lapse. I'm not talking about that. All of us struggle with those. We get to talking and we realize that something that we're repeating or something that we are saying is not entirely accurate. We all fall into that trap from time to time. But I'm talking about the individual who habitually, consistently shades the truth, alters the truth, and is comfortable with the lie. What is the result? When the truth is compromised, when we're not sure we can trust each other, relationships suffer. Again, no rib punching, no finger pointing, but you all know you have been in situations, you have been in places where you were dealing closely with somebody who was known to have trouble with the truth. And unfortunately, even as a forgiving Christian brother or sister, you found yourself in the position where every time they told you something, then you questioned it. You questioned the veracity of what they said. You questioned their integrity. You weren't sure if you could believe them or not. Maybe there was a time when you wanted to believe them, but you'd gotten past that, and now you didn't even want to believe them because of that pattern of lying. Relationships suffer. Families suffer. Communities suffer. Churches suffer. You see, Jesus was observing that practice where oaths were manipulated to create the appearance of truth-telling without actually telling the truth. There was always an out. There was always a loophole that had been created grammatically, verbally, so that you couldn't be held responsible for what you had declared, what you had sworn to. As kids, we learned, I don't know who taught us, we learned it, that if you would cross your fingers behind your back when you said something, That gave you a free pass to lie. Again, I don't know who taught that. It never was a lesson in class. It never was a formal thing on the playground. It was just one of those things that we picked up. Perhaps you observed somebody doing it at some point along the way and realized, ooh, that could come in handy. I can say whatever I want to say. I can declare whatever I want to declare. And as long as my fingers are crossed behind my back, I'm good. Because God can see everything. God knows everything, and that is my pass. We can also use verbal gymnastics to create a lie that sounds like the truth. And so when we allow ourselves to get sucked into that pattern, when we get sucked into that habit, what is the consequence? What is the result? And this is an umbrella statement, but here's the heart of the issue. When we become really comfortable lying, there is a breach of trust. And when we can't trust one another, then the quality of our fellowship suffers. There is a loss of intimacy, because a part of fellowship, a part of integrity of relationships is being able to trust somebody and to trust what they tell you, to be able to lean on them, to depend on them, and to know that they are people of their word, not just that they keep their promises. You would hope that they would do that, but when they talk, when they share details, you know that they're probably not shading it, exaggerating it, being guilty of hyperbole for their purposes, but they are truth tellers. When you lose that, you look at that person with that questioning glance. You wonder, is this the truth? And you lose that ability to have confidence in them. And then there's this distance that is created, this emotional distance, this spiritual distance that's created in the body. And I think it isn't long before you get to that place where you are that church that I described a few minutes ago, where everything becomes very surface. And y'all, we can pat each other on the back. We can grip hands and shake hands. We can kiss cheeks. We can do all those things that appear to be wonderful fellowship, sweet, sweet spirit in this place, when really there is not, because there isn't that confidence. There isn't that trust. And that's the result of that habitual lie. When we become comfortable with that in our fellowship, it also demonstrates a tremendous lack of respect. When you will just bald-faced lie to somebody, you are saying without equivocation, I don't have any respect for you. I can tell you whatever I want to tell you, and I think I can get away with it, and that's just the way it is. It also shows a profound self-centeredness. As if you're allowed. That's okay. We can just do this, and there are no repercussions. Just say whatever you want to say, tell whatever you want to tell, and everybody's just going to go along with it no matter what. It shows a profound self-centeredness. It creates the need for more lies. Have you ever noticed that when you tell one, you have to tell about 3 more to keep that one supported? And it becomes very much like the old trick on the Ed Sullivan Show. I hadn't seen it in many other places than that, but they would bring out the guy who had all the little sticks, and then he'd put a plate on the end of a stick and get it spinning and get another one going and get another one going and have to come back around and spin this one again. And the question was, how many plates can he keep spinning at one time? And the question becomes, how many lies can you keep straight at one time? At some point, you're going to lose track of your lies. Oh, did I say that? When did I tell you that? No, you really did. There have been those things that have helped with our lying. I mean, some of you who still will say, well, I called you 3 times, have not discovered how caller ID works. Today, people know if you have called them or not. The name shows up. You say, well, I use a restricted number. I use one of those anonymous numbers. No, you're not smart enough for that. You just go ahead and call, and it shows up, and then you have the line of evidence there. We have to keep up with the technology to keep our lives going. What's the result of a lie? It creates a skepticism, a cynicism that is so unhealthy in the context of the body of Christ. So Jesus is talking to disciples and encouraging them to walk with one another, to trust one another, to love one another, to serve with one another. And here's an issue that can so deteriorate the quality of relationships. And so he goes straight to the point. What's the antidote to a lie? That's the third question that I would ask. And he didn't beat around the bush at all. He said simply this, but let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. So anything beyond these is of evil. Don't make any oath. Make no oath at all. There's no situation where you should have to prove that what you're saying is the truth. There's no situation for a believer where we ought to have to back it up with some fanciful oath that would prove that we are telling the truth. Just go ahead and be honest. Just go ahead and be forthright. Just go ahead and demonstrate some integrity. The clear antidote to a lie is the truth. And even though all of us are tempted to lie on a daily basis, and some of you are going to come out when we finish tonight and say, but Clint, what about? Clint, what about? Because there are exceptions to your rule. You've got to lie in this situation. John's question. Honey, does this dress make my behind look big? No, sweetheart. Now that's self-preservation. I mean, that's life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, that's what that is. Because, and she may say, and this is all hypothetical, no woman in this room, and John, you weren't speaking of personal experience, you'd heard this from other guys. No woman in this room, wants to be lied to. And you would say, if you were that woman, now I want you to be honest, you're not going to hurt my feelings. And you lied right there. You just tell me the truth. Does this make me look wide? No. If we said, you would not believe how that pattern exaggerates your girth. I mean, honey, it makes you look twice as big as you really are. You're not going to say, oh, thank you very much. That's the most loving thing you've said to me this week. So you're going to come out with those exceptions. There are very rare, very, very rare exceptions that you can say, well, Clint, a good lie is handy in these circumstances. No, as a believer, instinctively, we ought to tell the truth. Instinctively, we ought to feel uncomfortable with the lie and be honest, endeavoring to keep a truth-filled heart that guides our daily conversation because our words erupt out of our hearts, the very center of our being. Let's turn the coin over to where we were just a few moments ago. As we tell the truth to one another, that truth-telling engenders trust. I've shared with you before that one of the things that I ask of a couple when I'm doing premarital counseling, I'll just ask them, do you trust him? Do you trust her? And of course, when they're goggle-eyed over each other and just smitten at that point, oh, of course I do. Yes, I trust him or else I wouldn't be getting married. And I'll say something at that point that sounds a bit cynical, and I will say, but you don't trust them today like you're going to trust them in 6 months or a year or 2 years. You will trust them more when they prove themselves to be trustworthy. When you learn you can trust their word, and when they answer a question, they're being honest. And here's the other scary thing, y'all, and you know this, but let me just throw this in. You can undo years of integrity in 30 seconds with one lie. And so we have to just stay vigilant. I mean, at that point, you can't say, but all these years I've been honest with you, and this one time I lied. That's not a pass. It doesn't work. You can hope for forgiveness, you can hope for some grace, but we have to be vigilant, staying on task all the time so that we are more comfortable with the truth than we are with the lie. Truth-telling engenders trust. Truth-telling strengthens relationships because you know you can depend on that person, and as a result of that, truth-telling strengthens the sense of community, the body of Christ. As we're trying to reach people with the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the last thing that I want them to sense when they come through those doors is that this is a very awkward place to be. I want them to sense, and they may not understand it, but I would like for them to sense when they come through the door, there's something about this place and there's something about these people. They have a relationship that I don't understand. That's good. Our relationships are fueled by our relationship with Jesus Christ. And as we walk with him, truthfulness ought to characterize every part of our character. Now, if that makes you uncomfortable, then probably you need to spend some time with the Lord. And if you have become an habitual liar, I don't think that's a terminal condition. I think you can learn to tell the truth. How do I do that? Well, start on your knees. Just ask God to forgive you for being a liar. Number two, ask Him to prompt you to help you tell the truth. I believe He will. I believe He will keep us straight in that regard because He wants us to be people of character and people of integrity. All right, so we're going to have an invitation. Brother Michael, you get to lead this one. And I'm going to ask all the liars in the room to come to the altar. It reminds me of a humorous story. A preacher had preached on a passage very much like this, and this woman came down during the invitation. She was in the holy huddle, and she was well known for her lack of truth-telling. And she said to the preacher, "Preacher, I got under such conviction tonight, I've come forward, I want to lay my lying tongue on the altar." And he said, "Well, it's only 8 foot wide, but we'll do the best we can." Well, you may want to lay your lying tongue on the altar tonight, and I trust that you will, but I also want you to know that primarily that's going to be between you and the Lord.